Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Podcast. Tonight's first guest is somebody who is the co-founder of the PFG Vibecast as well as ProFootballGuru.com and also contributes to Fansided, NFL Spin Zone, and Elite Sports New York. To talk about draft storylines and other league news, Russell Baxter. How are you today?
I'm good, Madison. How are you?
I'm good. We'll do some draft storylines first, then at the end we'll do some quick hits around the league. So, to me, Kyler Murray, there's been some buzz lately about how he might not be going number one after all the speculation is that he is. Do you still think he's a lock to go number one to Arizona tomorrow night?
I don't think he's necessarily a lock, and it would be interesting to see if the Cardinals were offered anything that, the obligatory offer they couldn't refuse. It's very unusual to see a team draft a quarterback in the first round 2 years in a row, but it's certainly not unprecedented. And I think the only reason we're seeing this, Madison, is because the Cardinals' offense was so bad last year, not because of Josh Rosen, but just because of the unit itself. I mean, they were dead last in rushing yards, passing yards, total yards. No team had done that in the league in 41 years. And I think Steve Keim brought in Cliff Kingsbury to just jumpstart the offense, and I think Kingsbury's looking for a particular quarterback to do that, and Murray would obviously make sense. I don't think it's a lock. You can never tell. When you have some teams out there, like the Raiders, like the Giants, and they do have multiple first-round picks to play with, you can never rule out anything. Nothing to me ever is a massive surprise when it comes to the NFL draft.
Yeah, nothing really should surprise anybody because I'll never forget 2 years ago, I believe it was when Chicago moved up for Mitch Trubisky. No one saw that coming. And Rich Eisen, who's one of my favorites in the business, was stunned on NFL Network's coverage that year when the Bears moved up.
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of the beast. If we all knew what was going to happen, then I guess there wouldn't be any suspense to it. I mean, when I was at ESPN, I covered many a draft from behind the scenes and so on, and as much as you thought you knew, you really didn't.
Yeah, exactly. So we talk about Murray. So Josh Rosen, let's say the Cardinals do take Murray number one tomorrow night. Who do you think are the favorites to trade for Josh Rosen?
Well, I mean, the latest scuttlebutt you're hearing right now is that Washington wants to move up. And that was the team I thought made the most sense. I did a piece of it about 2 or 3 weeks ago in that regard. I think the Miami Dolphins are a team that could certainly look that way. I mean, they didn't sign Ryan Fitzpatrick for the long haul. I don't think the Redskins brought in Case Keenum for the long haul as well. So I think they are possibilities. There's some people who speculate the Los Angeles Chargers because obviously Phillip Rivers getting up there in years, the Giants. But I don't see the Giants giving up anything high in terms of any of those first-round picks. The Giants had too many other needs on the offensive line and certainly a pass rusher. I mean, I think those are all viable candidates. Some people have also thrown out the Patriots. They have 12 picks to choose from. One of these days, maybe, Tom Brady is going to not play football anymore, but every time they go after and try to find his successor, the successor winds up going elsewhere.
Yep. And here's a good one for you. Who do you think's under the most pressure at the draft in terms of a team?
Oh, that's very, very interesting. I mean, I think some people would say the Raiders because they have those 3 first-round picks, and you look at who they dealt away last year in terms of Khalil Mack, who had a big year for the Bears, helped them get to the playoffs. Amari Cooper helped the Cowboys get to the playoffs. So I think a lot of people would speculate that it's them. I think they would certainly be in the discussion, but I look at teams that have struggled for a little bit. I mean, I think the Redskins are a team that's under a little pressure. Jake Gruden has been there. This will be year 6 for him.
Wow.
Which is kind of unusual for the Daniel Snyder era. Bruce Allen is the team president. I'll be curious to see how they do. I mean, they've got, I think they have their share of draft picks. They're picking right in the middle. They've kind of been in limbo the last couple of years. They won the NFC East back in 2015, and they've kind of like bottomed out the last 3 years. Obviously, they were off to a good start last year. Alex Smith suffered that devastating injury. They went through 3 more starting quarterbacks. To me, the Redskins have a team that finally can run the football and finally play some defense. Now they need to get somebody who's highly reliable behind center. So, to me, I'm going to say the Redskins are certainly a possibility because of the coaching regime there.
That is a good one. I wrote down a couple teams, and the Redskins were not one of them. I wrote down the Raiders in terms of pressure because of the Khalil Mack thing and how they really didn't replace his production yet. And if one of those pass rushers drops to them at 4, I really think they should grab him. Like a Josh Allen's a great fit. If Quinnen Williams were to drop to them, great fit. And I know they like Devin White as well.
Well, you look at what the Raiders have done or did in the draft last year. They really didn't address the defensive line and haven't really addressed the defensive line that much in free agency. They're looking to get young players on that defensive front. And they got a couple last year. That's not high picks, but they had no pass rush whatsoever. But the Raiders, it's funny. I understand the Khalil Mack, what they did and what they were trying to accomplish in the sense that, Madison, you keep in mind, in 2016, the Raiders, they made the playoffs.
Yep, I remember that.
Khalil was the defensive player of the year, okay? But he was defensive player of the year on a team that finished, are you ready? 26th in the league in total defense.
Mm.
So
wow.
He had a big individual year, but it wasn't necessarily a year that helped the entire team in terms of turning their fortunes around on defense. They've had defensive issues for that team for any number of years. They tried to address it in the draft. Took some young cornerbacks that didn't necessarily pan out. Tried to fix it with a lot of Band-Aids during free agency. And listen, the Raiders been busy again with free agency and trades. 2 years in a row where they brought in a massive amount of people. But I'm also not going to be surprised to see the Raiders deal one of those latter first-round picks. There's always a team that likes to come up and move up into the first round, and I'm sure the Raiders could probably get, maybe a couple of picks moving to the second or third round. And to me, they need bodies, okay? And I know, like I just said, they signed a lot of veteran players, but they need a lot of homegrown bodies.
Yes, and another team I think is under pressure is the Giants, who obviously Eli Manning's still around. They have been heavily linked to Daniel Jones, the Duke quarterback. I think there's some people screaming for them to take a quarterback this year because what if they're like surprisingly decent next year and go 8-8? They won't even be in like the top of the draft trying to pick a quarterback for next year if they passed on one this year. So I think they're under immense pressure, and obviously they have to address the pass rush as well.
Well, you look at the moves that Dave Gettleman has made, okay? He traded away arguably their best pass rusher, Olivier Vernon, one of the best wide receivers in the league in Odell Beckham Jr. On the plus side, he did use the second pick in the draft last year on Saquon Barkley, and he was the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year. But quarterback is, kind of the beat-all, end-all discussion point when it comes to the New York Giants. Their offensive line needs a lot of help. Again, this is a team, like the Patriots. The Giants have 12 draft choices. They have to make the most of them. They can't reach for a player. They made some strides the second half of the year, but they still closed out the season on a 3-game skid. So, you look at this team and you think about the Giants that, 2016 they were 11-5 and their defense was lights out. The last 2 years combined, they've won 8 games. And that defense, again, Baxter is there now, and he's got some of his size as well. But that defense, and you look at what Gettleman has done. Vernon was dealt last year. Max Harrison was dealt. Eli Apple was dealt. He's trying to reshape that defense as much as he is the offensive front. And, staying the course with Eli Manning as long as possible. I mean, let's keep one thing in mind when it comes to Eli. He's always been erratic. He's gotten streaky at times, and some of those streakiness has led to championship. It's funny. The years that the Giants won the Super Bowl when he was the starting quarterback, Madison, they went through 4-game playoff runs and won all 4 games, obviously. But the other times the Giants made the playoffs, they were 1-out. So it's either he's had the hot hand, and they've had the hot hand, and David Tyrese had the hot hands at helmet. Mario Manningham had the hot hands in Super Bowl 46. So, but if you really take a look at those Giants championship teams in 2007 and 2011, they were led by some very, very good pass rushes and some very decent defense.
Yeah, those pass rushes were sensational. Justin Tuck and Jason Pierre-Paul. Strahan was in the first one. Another team I think's under some pressure. You talked about the Redskins and chances they move up. They're talking with the Jets, and I think the Jets are under some pressure here because I think it'd be a mistake if they traded down only because of those premier pass rushers at the top of the draft. Do you think it's a mistake if the Jets trade down?
Well, again, depending on what they would get for it, okay? And listen, we saw the other day the Kansas City Chiefs give up an awful lot to get a pass rusher in Frank Clark, and who's to say that one of these teams could, again, give the Jets an offer they can't refuse? I think Mike McCagnon is under a lot of pressure. I don't know if Adam Gase is necessarily under a lot of pressure. I don't know if the team in general, but I think the general manager is. Todd Bowles isn't there anymore. So they've started anew with a new head coach and taken an offensive philosophy, opposed to where Todd Bowles was there for 4 years. Sunk big money into Le'Veon Bell. This is not a team without talent, but you go back and look at the Jets defense in recent years. It used to be the Jets defense kind of carried the team for the most part, and that's not been the case as of late. I mean, and they've got some nice young defensive players like Leonard Williams, like Jamal Adams, and so on. So they have to continue to build on there. With the 3rd pick in the draft, they could obviously get one of those blistering pass rushers. But again, if someone comes up, and even if it's just a flip play, remember you mentioned the Trubisky deal a couple of years ago. That was just the Bears flopping one spot from 3 to 2. But they wound up giving an awful lot that San Francisco was able to parlay into things.
Yep. And 2 other teams that are rumored in the quarterback market, the Broncos and the Bengals. Do you think any of those 2 teams realistically will take a quarterback in the first couple rounds?
The Bengals had the worst defense in the league last year, total yards allowed and passing yards allowed, and they've got obviously their new head coach is Zach Taylor, who's the Rams quarterback coach last year. And, to me, Andy Dalton has had his moments. But as we have learned, it's not necessarily Andy Dalton's fault that the team was not able to win a playoff game. This team hasn't won a playoff game since 1990. Andy Dalton was nowhere to be found in 1990. So, but they have a new coach for the first time in a long time with Zach Taylor. And, Dalton and H.A. Green and Joe Mixon, and hopefully they can stay healthy. The thing that happened with the Bengals in recent years, they let their offensive line deteriorate and lose people from free agency. Andrew Whitworth went to the Rams. Kevin Seifert went to the Browns. He's now with the Giants because of that trade. But defensively, I mean, they have Geno Atkins. Their linebacking core left a lot to be desired last year. Vontaze Burfict was finally cut loose by the team. He's now with the Raiders. You watch them play defense at the end of the year. Remember, that team got off to a terrific start last year.
You're right, and they had the primetime game against the Chiefs, and then they unraveled.
Yeah, well, I mean, and when they lost last year, they lost badly. It wasn't like they were losing a bunch of nail biters. They had some big. They went into Indianapolis last year and beat the Colts in Week 1. They went into Atlanta, who was playing decent at the time, and rallied to beat them. They got off to a terrific start. The game that really killed them was letting that Pittsburgh game get away. After they had taken the lead and Ben Roethlisberger he's still a relatively young player. So I'd be a little surprised if they kind of, ditched Andy Dalton and that whole thing. I think they're going to let Zach Taylor work with him and see what they can do.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Another team I mentioned in the same sentence as the Bengals was the Broncos. They obviously traded for Joe Flacco in the very beginning of the offseason. They've been linked to quarterbacks. Do you think they stick with Flacco for pretty much the whole year, despite a possibility of the rookie, or do you think they draft the rookie?
Listen. I don't know if they'll go after a quarterback in the first round. I think they have other needs. Listen, Vic Fangio is now the head coach. He was the defensive coordinator for the Bears last year. They were third in the league in total defense. They gave up the fewest rushing yards. The Bears led the league at 36 takeaways. He did a lot for that club. And, been around the league a long time. I mean, I think they want to go back to the formula that got them that last Super Bowl win. Let the quarterback do just enough. And let's not forget, the year they won the Super Bowl 50, their quarterbacks, Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler, really didn't do them any favors all year. They turned over the ball a lot. Peyton wound up getting hurt, and their defense really, really carried them. The Broncos' problems in the last couple of years, some people might point to just the quarterback. I think it's been the deterioration of the defense, slowly but surely. So having Fangio in there, again, it's his first NFL head coaching job, is a big move. To me, Flacco is a stopgap measure for a couple of years. But I could see the Broncos going after a quarterback maybe in the mid rounds.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see what they do. A couple quick hitters before I let you go. You mentioned Frank Clark in that trade from Seattle to Kansas City. Do you think that makes the Chiefs Super Bowl favorites, if not just the AFC favorites?
I don't know about that. I go back. I wrote a piece yesterday about, in essence, I'm not saying D Ford and Frank Clark are the same player. I'm not saying that at all. Okay? But Kansas City and Pittsburgh tied for the league in sacks last year. Okay? They both had 52 sacks. Chris Jones had a monster year, so did Ford. Think about this. The Chiefs had 52 sacks. They had 27 takeaways, and they still gave up over 26 points a game, Madison. So, I don't know. Does Frank Clark make that big of a difference? Remember, now Steve Spagnuolo is the defensive coordinator there, so they are going to a 4-3 defense. So maybe that's the remedy. But to me, it's a little more than just the pass rush. Tyrann Mathieu there, I thought, was great. That's one of the best pickups of the offseason. They also got Alex Okafor. They're going to that 4-3 under Spagnuolo. But, Spagnuolo's had his share of success and also some really bad seasons as a defensive coordinator as well. So I think the jury's still out. Listen, they lost a lot of people. Rob Gronkowski retired. I'm sure there's some head scratchers saying, is this the year? I got to see it before I believe it. Defending champions until the throne. That would be New England.
Yeah, I think it's close because I think the loss of Gronk will hurt them, although I believe in Belichick and his ways of fixing his team. Speaking of more trade rumors, Patrick Peterson, do you buy the rumors that he's on the trade block?
I'd be a little surprised by that, but it's also not the first time he's been mentioned in trade talks. We heard some of this last year as well, and then, I think he had made some noise on social media, if I remember right, and, it all kind of disappeared and so on. He's obviously a top-notch corner, and you're certainly looking for that in the league these days. Again, I think if it did happen, and, again, you never say never, okay? But I think it would take, I don't think the Cardinals are giving him away. I don't think the Cardinals are giving Josh Rosen away, okay? They know the value of Josh Rosen. It's a different kind of value opposed to Patrick Peterson. But it's funny you say, do you buy them? They're out there for a reason. It's just a matter of trying to figure out who started them, Madison.
Yep. Because the Odell Beckham rumors were out there for a while, and then Dave Gettleman's quote, we didn't sign him to trade him, and then they end up trading him a couple weeks later to the Browns.
That's right. That is exactly my point. Okay, obviously Gettleman was not misquoted. Okay, he obviously had a change of thought or philosophy or whatever, and it's not lost on the fact to me that the Giants have around the 2 trades this year, and that of course is not unusual. You know that as well as anyone. Teams have a tendency to trade with other teams. There's a comfort level there. We saw in less than a year, we saw the Steelers and the Raiders involve themselves in 3 trades involving wide receivers: Martavis Bryant, Brian Switzer, and of course Antonio Brown. We see the Patriots and the Browns engaged in a number of different trades, and people are like, well, that's probably the only thing the Patriots and Browns have had in common for about 2 decades is the fact that they orchestrated a bunch of trades with each other. So I don't, again, never say never. And, depending on a package, could the Cardinals be offered something? There could be a team out there who says, you know what, we are a Patrick Peterson away from really making a run at the Super Bowl. So, again, never say never.
Yep, 2 more quick ones. The schedule came out a week ago. I heard you on your podcast last week talk about it. What's your favorite game that stands out to you on that schedule for next year?
Well, I mean, I obviously like the divisional matchups and so on. I think the thing that's, to me, it's less about one game per se. I mean, obviously we're going to have those playoff rematches. We're going to see Kansas City and New England and and a couple others as well. To me, the thing that was most interesting about the schedule is what the league decided to do with the Raiders and the Buccaneers, Madison. 2 road games, a trip to London, an off week, and then 2 more road games. Both teams got the same type of setup. And I know, Bruce Arians, now the coach of Buccaneers, was certainly a little displeased with that. So I found that, I don't even know if the word is interesting. Okay? I mean, listen, if you're a team, I think having those road games early in the season makes you battle test it, and then if you have those home games late, you can build up a little equity. But that's a lot of wear and tear. And again, as someone once said, I didn't say it, I know they're not driving to the games. They're obviously flying. Okay? So, but to be away from home for basically a month and a half, I found that to be highly unusual. The other thing that struck me about the schedule was the Falcons, who have a stretch where they play 5 straight games within the division. Okay, I've seen some late season by the Seahawks 4 or 5 years ago where they played, I think, like 5 of their last 6 and so on. But 5 straight games in the division. I don't think they played anybody in their division, Madison, like the first, 7 or 8 weeks.
That's crazy. Things that stood out to me in the schedule, you mentioned it with the Raiders and the Buccaneers, with the London thing and a bunch of road games and a bye. I love the interleague matchups when the AFC plays the NFC. Chiefs-Bears is one of the games on the schedule this year, and I am looking forward to that. And then Rams against the Browns, I believe that's a primetime game. I think those are the 2 games that stand out to me the most.
Yeah, it's always interesting. We find out the day after the season is over who's going to play who. We just never know when it's going to be. Seeing the Browns in primetime, which we obviously haven't seen in a while. And I just like what the league is doing this year. I know it's become tradition since 2004 for the Super Bowl champion to host the first game of the year. But I understand why the league did Packers-Bears for the 100th anniversary. I also think it's interesting that I'm sure you know this is the 50th season of Monday Night Football, the 50th. And if memory serves, which it should, the Jets and Browns play on Monday night in week 2. The Jets and the Browns were the very first Monday Night Football game back in 1970.
That's interesting. And that was rumored to be week 1, but when the schedule came out, it ended up being week 2. I remember there was some speculation on Twitter that was going to be week 1.
I think I'd have to go back and look. I don't have it readily available, but my guess is that the league wanted to get something closer to the actual date of the anniversary. That's just a guess on my part. I'd have to go back and look at when that Jets-Browns game was played, September. Remember, in 1970, it was only a 14-game season, and the season started later. It didn't start the first week of September. It started like mid or late September back then. So it might Joe Namath threw a pick six late in the game.
Wow, that's way before my time. Last but not least, before I let you go, do you have a bold prediction for the draft?
I don't know if I have a bold prediction. I'm going to be interested to see where some of the running backs go. There's always this speculation that you don't have to take a running back high, and yet every time we see a team kind of take a running back high, more times than not, it actually, especially the last couple of years, kind of panned out. Leonard Fournette was kind of high, and he helped the team get to the playoffs in 2017. Jacksonville, obviously, we saw what Ezekiel Elliott did. Saquon Barkley had a big year last year. I know the Giants didn't make the playoffs, but he was Offensive Rookie of the Year. Sometimes we dismiss the running game. But I can tell you this, if you were really watching the playoffs last year, it was the running game and run defense that really kind of dictated what was happening. I think in last year's playoffs, the team that had the most running plays by the end of the game, Madison, was undefeated, 11-0.
That's a very interesting stat. So it was good to have you on today.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks very much. It's long overdue, and I like what you do on social media. You're very active. You seem like you have a lot of fun, and thanks for asking me.
No problem. Have a good one.
You too.